Is there anybody out there? Welcome to Air Church. We'll get started in just a hot second. And we're live! Welcome to Air Church, or BYOB, which stands for Bring Your Own Bible. But that's okay. If you don't have a Bible, that is completely fine, because we will show all the relevant verses on the screen. Well, for those of you who are returning here, well, thank you so much. It's so nice to see you again. I can see the chat is filling up. That's awesome. And if you are just checking us out for the first time, BYOB or Air Church is an informal Bible study, which basically happens once or twice a week, depending on other things. And basically, we're going through various books of the Bible and prayerfully considering what God has put in there for our instruction. So I just wanted to thank you so much. If you want to find out more about Air Church, there is a pinned link for you with all the social links, social media links for you to follow. If you, whatever you're on, Instagram or Facebook or whatever you're on, I'm sure you can find me there. And we'll get started in just a second. Well, that's great. Oh, and just for your information before we start, if this time of streaming does not work for you, well, just make sure you subscribe and hit that bell icon so that you can be notified of other streams, because I try to stream so that people in various time zones can watch this live. Okay, so if you are in Asia, that's okay too, because I will stream in times that are suitable for the Asian audience as well. Well, anyway, let's get started, guys. We are currently in the book of Revelation. All right, let me just switch to this teaching screen. That's great. We are in the book of Revelation. And Revelation, if you know, it's the last book in our Bibles, and it was penned by John, the apostle. He was the closest to Jesus. He's often referred to as the disciple that Jesus loved. Obviously, John was very close to Jesus. He witnessed some of the events that other disciples were not privy to. One of them is Jesus is transfigured in front of John Jesus shows himself in full glory. So anyway, John is writing this book for us from an island where he was imprisoned as a prisoner of Jesus, basically for preaching the gospel. He was imprisoned. He was a political prisoner, and on the island, while he is in exile, he sees a series of visions, and that's what we're going to look at. These visions are still current because they are talking about events that are going to transpire in the future. Well, that's wonderful. Let's dig in. So, today we are in Revelation 13, and I just titled this Satan's Trinity. You will see, if you stick with us until the end, you will see why this is Satan's Trinity. And by the way, this is very interesting because there are many arguments for the Trinity in the Bible, but I've never encountered an argument from Satan, because this is as we read the Bible, we kind of see that Satan is trying to copy the Trinity. He creates his own Trinity, and by the end of today's study, you will see what I mean by that. Well, here's an argument. Well, if the Trinity is false, well, then why would Satan be trying to fake that or counterfeit God's Trinity, right? Anyway, well, that's something. I'll leave you with that thought. And now let's dig into our study today. Very interesting stuff indeed. So what's the context of today's study? Well, first of all, we see that John is describing a series of visions of the future. So remember, in our previous studies, we looked at various ways of looking at Revelation, and not everyone looks at Revelation the same way. Some people think it's a lot of it has already been fulfilled in the first century, and others look at the Revelation and think, hey, this is just some allegory. This is nothing specific here. This is just some spiritual lessons for us to learn. Well, no, we looked at some details in the past, and we saw that the correct view of Revelation is still the futurist view, that things that are described are the culmination of God's plan has not yet happened. Okay, so these are visions of the future. It's also important to note that John is describing things that he hasn't seen yet. So he's using the language, obviously, that was accessible to him in first century. So sometimes he's describing things that he doesn't really understand what they are, and he's using the language that that just reflects that. Okay, and it's also important to note that he's not transported into the future, but it's sort of a vision of the future. So sometimes events look very realistic, but sometimes these events are also sort of vision-like, so or dream-like, right? There is a lot of symbolism which comes straight out of the Old Testament. And chances are that if you are a careful study of Revelation, you will definitely be taken to other books of the Bible in order to find out what these things mean. Wow. Well, this is great. I just see that more people arrived in the chat. That's wonderful. Thank you so much, guys, for your support. And you really make this experience a blessing for me. Well, great. So, by the way, today we're going to look at Revelation 13, as I mentioned. If you don't have a Bible, that's fine. Just look at the screen. I'll show you all the verses. But at the same time, we will look at other passages, because have you guys ever done like a jigsaw puzzle where you don't know where the piece belongs, but once you find that place where it belongs, you realize it has some patterns that fit a particular place. You move to that area of the picture, right? And oh, wow, now you found where that fits. And now there's absolutely no mistake. It fits there, right? Today's narrative of Revelation 13 is sort of like that. We are going to have to puzzle some things together. Well, let's jump in, and we're going to try and read 3 passages from the Bible that are more or less parallel to each other, and they are talking about this. They all come to fruition in this time called the Great Tribulation. So the Great Tribulation was, as Jesus mentioned in Matthew 24, a time, such a hard time that the planet has never experienced such a hard time. For then there will be a great tribulation such as has not occurred since the beginning of the world until now, nor ever will again. Okay, so that's Jesus, his own words about how hard it's going to be. And again, we have a parallel passage that talks about the same period in history in Daniel 12. And there will be a time of distress such as never occurred since there was a nation until that time. All right, let's dive in and see what John saw in his vision today. Again, we're looking at another aspect of this period that is referred to as the Great Tribulation. Revelation 13. And the dragon stood on the sand of the seashore. Then I saw a beast coming up out of the sea, having 10 horns and 7 heads, and on his horns were 10 crowns, and on his heads were blasphemous names, basically names against God. And the beast that I saw was like a leopard, and his feet were like those of a bear, and his mouth like the mouth of a lion. And the dragon gave him power, gave him his power, his own power, and his throne, and great authority. Okay, well, this is interesting. You can see a lot of symbolism there. Just keep in mind those animals: leopard, lion, bear. Okay, let's move on. I saw one of his heads as if it had been fatally wounded, and his fatal wound was healed. And the whole earth was amazed and followed after the beast. They worshipped the dragon because he gave his authority to the beast. And they worshipped the beast, saying, "Who is like the beast? And who is able to wage war with him?" So obviously the beast is very powerful, and the whole world went after it, and it or him or it, right? We don't know yet. And we know that it's the dragon that gave the power to the beast to be so powerful, right? The beast is using the dragon's power to be powerful. Verse 5. A mouth was given to him, speaking arrogant words and blasphemies, and authority to act for 42 months was given to him. 42 months, guys. You should already be sensitized to this fact that 42 months is 3.5 years, which goes back to that period of tribulation we talked about in previous episodes. And he opened his mouth in blasphemies against God, to blaspheme his name, God's name, and his tabernacle, the temple as well, that is, those who dwell in heaven. It was also given to him to make war with the saints and to overcome them, and authority was given to him over every tribe, people, language, and nation. Okay, guys, keep that in mind. Over every tribe, all people, and every language and every nation. See, that's one of the hints that we know it's still in the future, because such a thing has never happened in history before. So what is the meaning of these, these symbolic things like the heads? The beast has 10 heads and it has horns. Well, in order to do that, we're going to go to another piece which follows just a few chapters later. We have an explanation where John sees another vision of the same beast, but this time this beast is being, a woman is riding this beast. But in that passage, which we will be talking about in detail further down the road, the explanation to this question, what are these heads and what are these horns, that's where it's explained, okay? So if we jump forward to Revelation 17, look here in this verse 9 here, John is describing the same beast, but this time this beast is, there's a woman riding it. Here is the mind which has wisdom. Basically, John is telling you, okay, some wisdom is needed here to interpret this. The 7 heads are 7 mountains upon which the woman sits. And they are 7 kings. Oh, the mountains are kings. Interesting. 5 have fallen. One is at the present time, and other has not yet come. And when he comes, he must remain a little while. The beast which was and is not is himself also an 8th and is one of the 7th, and he goes to destruction. Okay, so this final one is going to be destroyed, obviously. But he's also from the previous one, okay? So bear with me, it's a little bit confusing, but it's the 8th is also one of the 7th, but actually at the same time it's the 8th, which is it's different. Separate from them, but it's from the 7th. And he goes to destruction. All right, and the 10 horns which you saw are 10 kings. Okay, so that's the explanation. Who have not yet received a kingdom, but they receive authority as kings with the beast for 1 hour, so for a limited time. These have one purpose, and they give their power and authority to the beast. So I guess those 10 kings, their only purpose is so that they can empower the beast, right? Okay, still enigmatic, but don't worry, it will all start to make sense, okay? But just think about that relationship. The purpose of the 10 kings is there to give their power and authority to the beast that will emerge out of them, okay? Very interesting. So what's the symbolism? Well, we just saw that the heads in one passage are also likened to mountains, and then those are the kingdoms. Okay, so there will be 10 kingdoms. Very, very interesting. Well, and what about the horns? The horns are referred to as rulers or kings. All right, so keep that in mind. We're going to read that again, but this time with the idea of, okay, the heads, the 10 heads are 10 kingdoms, and the horns are the kings. Of course, let me suggest another symbol there, because the beast is coming out of the waters, okay? And sometimes in the Bible, the waters can loosely symbolize, in some prophetic terms, the peoples, okay? So the beast is emerging out of the peoples of the earth, okay? So let's keep that image in mind. But now, what I'd like to do is take you to the Old Testament, because surprisingly, and anyone who would read, let's say in first century, John writes his Revelation and then sends that book to the churches of his time. And when people read that, they immediately recognize, whoa, this vision is just like something similar that Daniel saw back in, before Jesus was even born, around 600 BC. In Babylon, when Daniel was taken into exile, he had also a series of visions. So here in Daniel 7, we read the following. Let's just follow along and you will see some parallels. Daniel said, I was looking in my vision by night, and behold, the four winds of heaven were stirring up the great sea. Okay, here we have the sea again. Okay, maybe it's the peoples of the world, okay, are being stirred. And four great beasts were coming up from the sea, different from one another. Okay, so in Revelation we have one beast that came out of the sea, but here we have four beasts that Daniel sees. The first beast was like a lion. Okay, remember there was a lion in Revelation, but had the wings of an eagle, so it was a winged lion. I kept looking until its wings were plucked, and it was lifted from the ground and set up on 2 feet like a man. A human mind was also given to it. Okay, the beast, intelligent beast with a human mind, first like a lion, then the wings are no longer necessary, but stands up like a man. Okay, that's not important, but let's just focus on that lion for now. Okay, then, and behold, another beast, a second one resembling a bear, and it was raised up on one side, and 3 ribs were in its mouth between its teeth, and they said to it, arise, devour much meat. Okay, so obviously a vicious beast that is very carnivorous, eats a lot of meat. After this, I kept looking, and behold, another one like a leopard. Okay, so we have a third animal now, leopard, which had on its back 4 wings of a bird. The beast also had 4 heads, and dominion was given to it. Wait, do you remember in Revelation 13? We were just reading that passage. When John saw that beast coming out of the water, it had feet like a lion, then it was sort of like a bear, and then it was like a leopard. All these 3 check out so far, right? Very, very interesting. A lot of parallels happening here. Okay, after this, I kept looking in the night visions, and behold, a 4th beast. Okay, so now we have a 4th beast, dreadful and terrible, and extremely strong, and it had large iron teeth. Okay, so at the time, iron was something that was, the strongest material known to man. It devoured and crushed and trampled down the remainder with its feet. So whatever was left behind or before that beast came out, it was all destroyed. And basically that beast took over. And it was different from all the beasts that were before it. Okay, there was something different about it. And it had 10 horns. Okay, another hint. Remember? 10 horns. All right, very, very interesting. Okay, Daniel, what else are you going to tell us? Verse 8, while I was thinking about the horns, Daniel also didn't know what it meant. Behold, another horn, a little one, came up among them, and 3 of the previous horns were plucked out before it. And behold, this horn possessed eyes like human eyes, and mouth uttering great boasts. Okay, so obviously the horn is not just a horn, but it's a human, right? It's got eyes and it speaks, and the eyes, I guess, can speak of intelligence, that it's an intelligent being, and it's also watchful. It can learn, it can perceive. So yeah, it's very interesting. So we have that, just like in Revelation 13, there were 10, 10, was it 10 heads? I think so. Yeah. Here we have 10 horns, and this little one coming out of them, which seems to be very intelligent and uttering great boasts. So then I kept looking because of the sound of the boastful words which the horn was speaking. So obviously it's a person. I kept looking until the beast was killed and its body was destroyed and given to the burning fire. Okay, so we already know that destiny of that fourth beast is going to be destruction in fire. Okay. As for the rest of the beasts, their dominion was taken away. Okay. But an extension of life was granted to them for an appointed period of time. So it seems like these beasts were coming out of the water one by one, and they kind of had their dominion for a while, and then they were taken away. But this fourth beast was very different. Then in verse 13, I kept looking in the night visions, and behold, with the clouds of heaven, one like a son of man was coming, and he came up to the Ancient of Days and was presented before him. So this really echoes our previous studies in Revelation, where the Lamb appears before the throne of God, the throne room of God in heaven, and he's given a scroll, right? And to him was given dominion, honor, and a kingdom, so that all the peoples, nations, and populations of all languages might serve him. His dominion is an everlasting dominion, which will not pass away, and his kingdom is one which will not be destroyed. So here, guys, you have the whole overview of human civilization of history. There would be 4 beasts. First 3 will come out in succession. Then the 4th beast will kind of take over. It will be very different, very terrible and dangerous. But then that 4th beast will also be destroyed. Okay, and let me just post to you, it will be destroyed when that period is linked to the Great Tribulation. All right, and then of course Christ's kingdom is going to last forever, and it will never be destroyed. Okay, very, very interesting. So what is this meaning of the 4 beasts? You might be wondering. Well, there was the leopard, there was... Okay, well, virtually all commentators agree, and there's absolutely really very little doubt of what these beasts are. Okay, these beasts represent the kingdoms or the empires of the world, because now we have the benefit of 2020 vision history. We're looking back and we understand that that's exactly what Daniel saw. Of course, remember when Daniel was writing his visions, that was still yet in the future. So let's just find out, because Daniel actually gets an explanation. In verse 19, let's skip ahead a little bit. He says, then I desired to know the exact meaning of the 4th beast. What's up with these beasts? Which was different from all the others, exceedingly dreadful, with its teeth of iron and its claws of bronze, and which devoured, crushed, and trampled down the remainder with its feet. So whatever was left before that beast came on the scene, it was basically taken over. And the meaning of the 10 horns that were on its head, I wanted to know what it means, Daniel is saying. And the other horn, which came up later, and before which 3 of the horns fell, namely that horn which had eyes and a mouth uttering great boasts, and which was larger in appearance than its associates. I kept looking, and that horn was waging war with the saints and prevailing against them. Okay, and until the Ancient of Days came and judgment was passed in favor of the saints of the highest one, and the time arrived when the saints took possession of the kingdom. So again, little overview. It's kind of he's basically saying, yes, this horn was waging war, was obviously persecuting the people of God, but then the Ancient of Days, God himself intervened, and there was judgment, and of course the saints prevailed. The judgment was in favor of the saints, and the saints took possession of the kingdom. Very, very encouraging, guys. Very, very encouraging. So this is what he said. The angel revealed to Daniel some of the details of what the vision was. The 4th beast will be a 4th kingdom, okay, on the earth, which will be different from all the other kingdoms, and will devour the whole earth and trample it down and crush it. Okay, the entire earth, right? As for the 10 horns, out of this kingdom 10 kings will arise. Okay, so we know 10 kings again, right? Do you see the parallels? It's almost like a mirror image of the revelation that John received in chapter 13. And another will arise after them, and he will be different from the previous ones and will humble 3 kings. Okay, so obviously this is difficult to imagine because it hasn't happened yet. And yet we already know what this actually means. And he will speak, that little horn, right? That little horn, he will speak against the Most High and wear down the saints of the Highest One. And so he will be persecuting the people of God. And he will intend to make alterations in times and in law. And they will be handed over to him for times, and half a time. Okay, guys, so if you've been with us for any extended period of time or any period of time, you know that this is a very strange way of saying 3.5 years, which exactly John used in our previous study, right? In Revelation 12. Okay, so again, this period of time is linked to that period called the Great Tribulation, 3.5 years. But the court will convene for judgment. Well, obviously God intervenes and his dominion will be taken away, annihilated. He will be destroyed and destroyed forever. And of course we know from Revelation that the destruction of it will be a lake of fire. All right, very, very interesting. So what are the 4 beasts of Daniel 7? There's really no doubt of what they are. Okay, the first beast that Daniel sees is the beast, the empire of Babylon that actually took over, destroyed, took Jews into exile, and that beast is the Babylon where Daniel currently is residing and writing this prophecy. Well, the second beast which came was the next empire that conquered Babylon. That was Persia. So that's the bear-like beast, okay? It looks like a bear, and it was very carnivorous, remember? It was voracious, and it ate a lot of meat. Okay, so maybe it was also violent as well, okay? So the first one would be represented by Nebuchadnezzar, Babylon, then the Persia, of course, a great empire in history. And then what followed Persia? If you have studied history, you know that it was Greece. Alexander the Great came on the scene and conquered the entire known world, okay? And it's interesting that in this vision of Daniel, later that beast gets 4 heads, okay? It not only looks like a leopard, but it also has 4 heads. And from history, we know that Alexander divided his kingdom into 4 pieces and gave each to one of his sons, one of his 4 sons, which again, you see all these prophecies fit like a glove to these respective empires. Well, that's neat, you might think. Well, so we had Babylon, we had Persia and the Greece, but what about that 4th beast that's so terrible? And it has these iron teeth and unlike anything that we've seen before. Well, that empire, again, there is no doubt about what it is. And that is Rome. Okay, guys, this is Rome. Greece was conquered by Rome. And at the time, of course, at the time of John's writing, Rome was controlling the entire known world. There has never been an empire in the world like the Roman Empire, which basically spanned the continents and all the known continents at the time, and of course lasted for a long time. And so there is really no doubt about it that this terrible beast with iron teeth is really Rome. However, there's one problem, right? Because how can Rome last until the end of our age? Because I think the Roman Empire, you wouldn't think of it as being still in power, right? Yes, and you would be correct, because there's something interesting about that particular beast. Okay, so how can there be Roman Empire in the future yet? Okay, is that even possible? Is that a crazy idea? Well, it's not that as crazy as you might think, and I will just try to explain to you what I mean by that, okay? Of course, I wouldn't think of it as Rome as you remember it from history books when they were wearing robes and so on. But there's something about that particular beast, whether or the makeup of the empire, such as maybe the political structure of it with the Senate. And, we basically, a lot of our Western democracies have adopted these ideas and are actually governed based on the same model as Rome was. So how can there be Rome in the future? Well, I'd like to pose to you this idea that there will be an empire called, well, let's just call it for all purposes just of this study today, Rome 2.0, okay? Rome on steroids. Rome 2.0, and we know it hasn't happened yet because we've never experienced anything like it. But I will suggest to you some exciting possibilities of how it can actually come about. Okay, so in Daniel 7, we continue. It says, this is what he said, the fourth beast will be a fourth kingdom on the earth, which will be different from all the other kingdoms. So that is the Rome that John knew. It's the Rome of his day, okay? And will devour the whole earth and trample it down and crush it. But then look at verse 24. There's something interesting here. And as for the 10 horns that you saw later on, out of this kingdom 10 kings will arise. Okay, so it is possible that verse 24 and verse 23 are not exactly one after another in time. There could be a gap in time here between verse 23 and 24. All we know is that out of this, the kingdom that is remaining after Rome or whatever, or of that fourth beast, the 10 kings will arise. And remember, the purpose of those 10 kings is to empower the beast, okay? Kind of rebuild it, okay? And he will be different from the previous ones, and he will humble 3 kings, okay? So it is possible that between verse 23 and verse 24, we have quite a substantial period of time, which, there's a gap. And it's quite interesting. In other prophecies, there also seems to be a gap. There's a lot of Israel's history is covered by prophecy, and a lot of history is still not fulfilled, and it's still encoded in our Old Testament prophecy and so on. However, there seems to be, when this time associated with, some theologians call it the church age, there seems to be as if God's prophecy clock kind of stopped. And we may be living with that period of parentheses where not much is known about it until the clock starts ticking again, right? Until the clock starts ticking again. Remember when the focus shifts back to Israel. So that may be at the end of the church age, as some people refer to. Okay, so this is very fascinating. So what about that little horn? I would like to know more about that little horn who is referred to as he, right? Who is he, that little horn? All right, or sometimes, or in Revelation 13, he really controls the beast. He's representing the beast of Revelation 13 that came out of the sea. Okay, so who is he? Well, some people refer to him as the Antichrist. Antichrist. It doesn't mean that he is like a false Christ or that he pretends to be Christ, but he is in type. He wants to portray himself as Christ. Okay, so he's not. He basically tries to eclipse Christ in his function. He wants to be the savior of the world in his own way. Okay, the Antichrist. What do we know about him? What do we know about the Antichrist? By the way, in the Bible, there are many antichrists, Antichrist people who are against Christ or against the truth, and they're actively, campaigning against the truth of God's, or the gospel, for example. But the Antichrist is a specific individual, as you have seen. It was, that little horn. Well, we know that he's a human. He speaks, he has eyes, he utters blasphemies against God. Okay, well, so in a human form. However, he's not acting alone. Okay, this is very interesting because we know that he is empowered by Satan's power. I don't know how that works, whether Satan actually somehow indwells this individual, just like the Holy Spirit indwells believers under the new covenant. Well, maybe, we know that Satan entered Judas, right? So maybe Satan has that kind of power to indwell an individual and empower him to act. Okay, so that's what the Antichrist would be like. Okay, we know that Antichrist arises from this future Rome 2.0 structure, the 10 kings, right? He arises from that structure, which is yet future. Okay, so we know that he is yet a future entity or future character. We also know that he's going to wield more power, military power and political power than any human in history. So just imagine, Napoleon had a big dream, that didn't work. Alexander the Great had a big dream, almost reached it, then he died. Well, none of them were able to control the entire world. But this guy, he will. Very, very, very interesting. So every nation will follow him. Every nation. Okay, so we haven't had such situation in history before, where every nation would follow one leader. Now, we've had some, where many countries were maybe aligned. For example, during some recent wars, when wars are fought, and for example, the United States goes to fight, then countries align themselves with the United States and follow. And essentially, whatever the leader, whatever the US president says, the other, allied forces, they will just kind of cooperate with that. But we've never had a situation where the entire globe would unite and follow a single leader. And then, of course, we know from the previous studies that he, as the Antichrist, he's going to have a pact with Israel for 3.5 years, and then during the 7-year tribulation period is going to break that pact, and then he's going to perform some act called abomination of desolation, where he announces himself God in the temple. So there will be a temple standing in Jerusalem, and basically that will trigger the painful events that Jesus was warning us about. And what else do we know him? We know that he persecutes the people of God. Okay, so if you are a believer during the time when the Antichrist is in power, you are either in jail or you are dead. Basically, to profess your faith in Jesus at the time will equal a death sentence. But we know that his time is short because he's only 3.5 years, right? And then is ultimately destroyed by Jesus. And what a hopeful message that is. And I'm not only thinking about ourselves when we are struggling with evil. We know that evil is rampant in this world. We know that evil is going to be judged and that it's not going to be unchecked forever, indefinitely. But imagine people going through the Great Tribulation and reading this book, how much hope this will give to them. That, okay, it's only 3.5 years, okay? Can we make it through another day? And many will not. Many will be martyred for their faith. But we know that ultimately Jesus is going to step in and end this tyranny, this global tyranny. Okay, let's go back to Revelation 13 because it's very interesting. The remaining part of the vision is also fascinating. In verse 8, all who live on the earth will worship him. Okay, so this little horn, this Antichrist, they will worship him. Everyone whose name has not been written since the foundation of the world in the book of life of the Lamb who has been slaughtered. Okay, so here's maybe a word of advice. Okay, listen, if you want to live, you make sure you don't worship this guy. Okay, and this will be very relevant during the time of Great Tribulation, when people will be coming to faith as a result of those 144,000 of Jewish witnesses, right? Many people will be will come to Christ in faith during that time. However, they know, okay, whatever you do, just don't worship that Antichrist. If anyone has an ear, let him hear. Okay, so again, this is like our attention getter. Don't worship that guy. If anyone is destined for captivity, to captivity he goes. Okay, so some people will be imprisoned for disobeying the Antichrist. And if anyone kills with the sword, he must be killed. So some will be imprisoned, some will be killed. Here is the perseverance and the faith of the saints, okay? And that is going to be very hard time for believers on earth at the time. Then I saw another beast. Okay, so now we're seeing another beast coming up out of the earth, this time out of the earth. So notice there's a difference. That one, the other one was from the sea, which the Antichrist represents, right? But here we have another beast coming out of the earth, and he had two horns like a lamb. Okay, so he looks kind of gentle in appearance. Now the second beast is more gentle. It appears kind of gentle, right? Because the horns are not pointy and aggressive looking ones, but sort of like a lamb. And he spoke as a dragon. Okay, so, you know, maybe a very soft-spoken person, but every single word that he says is poison, blasphemy against God, but in a nice, kind manner, maybe, okay? That's what I'm imagining when I read these verses. He exercises all the authority of the first beast in his presence. So basically, whatever the Antichrist, you know, all the authority that Antichrist has, he exercises that authority, and he makes the earth and those who live on it worship the first beast. Okay, so the purpose of that second beast is to make everyone worship the beast, the Antichrist, okay, whose fatal wound was healed. Okay, so we'll talk about that wound in a moment. He performs great signs so that he even makes fire come down out of the sky to the earth in the presence of people. So we're talking about some things which are, you know, kind of supernatural on the surface, but who knows, because of modern technology or science, they may be natural, or they may be natural to those who have been initiated into the knowledge of how these things are done. And yet the majority of the world will be deceived, and they will think that whatever this entity, this person is saying, or the miraculous signs are truly miraculous. Or who knows, they could really be demonic, miraculous signs, such as the fire from the sky. But I believe, you know, there could be maybe in the future weapons developed where a fire could be thrown from the orbit, for example, you know, in a very precise manner. Who knows? And yet, if people don't know about these things existing, they will think that this is supernatural, right? It would be quite easy to trick them into thinking that, oh, wow, I have magical powers. All right. So, verse 14, and he deceives those who live on the earth because of the signs which it was given him to perform in the presence of the beast. So, you know, he might say, okay, let's nuke, and I'm using this loosely, you know, I'm not talking about nuclear weapons, but yes, I'm going to judge that area of the world, and now fire falls down from the sky into that area of the world. Yeah, right, well, everybody's, you know, amazed and afraid. So, telling those who live on the earth to make an image of the beast who had the wound of the sword and has come to life. So now there's going to be, this is sort of similar to the story where Nebuchadnezzar made his own golden image or statue, and everyone needed to worship that statue, and whoever refused to worship the statue would be put to death. This is something very similar, but here we don't have a statue, we have an image of the beast. So it could be a symbol, it could be even a picture, an image of the beast, or it could even be an electronic device with the screen of the beast, or it could be something where, I don't know, the beast is pictured on it. It doesn't matter. What it matters is that that thing, look at verse 15, and it was given to him to give breath to the image of the beast, so that the image of the beast would even speak and cause all who do not worship the image of the beast to be killed. So we're talking about some, you know, because how could it be in every household? Can you imagine? So it could be a device that you need to have in your home, and it either speaks to you or it has the image of the beast on it. Maybe, who knows, maybe it's even a wearable device that it's somehow, you know, it speaks and it causes all those who do not worship the image of the beast to be killed. So somehow it's pretty sophisticated. They will know that an individual is worshiping the beast or not. Okay, how is that possible? Well, with our modern technology, it's becoming more and more possible. Even now we have a little device sitting, some people, not me, I used to have one, but a little device on your desk that is talking to you, and you call it Alexa, and you say, hey Alexa, where's my package? Maybe Alexa is going to ask you to say a particular prayer as a proof that you are worshiping the beast. Who knows? I mean, these are devices that already exist right now, but just imagine 10, 15 years down the road, these could be much more sophisticated. So anyway, everyone on this planet must worship the beast or be killed. Okay, very, very, very hard situation there. And he causes all, the small and the great, the rich and the poor, and the free and the slaves, to be given a mark on their right hands or on their foreheads. Okay, so now the mark is typically just like God seals his people with the Holy Spirit. The mark is invisible. The Holy Spirit is indwelling us. Okay, and that means we are property of God. Okay, we are God's family. Well, Antichrist wants to copy that, counterfeit that, and he wants to put his mark, his signature, his seal onto every single person on this planet to indicate ownership. You belong to me. All right, so he causes, the second beast causes all the small and the great, the rich and the poor, everyone. Okay, so it's obviously going to be available for free. It is not going to be something you have to buy, but it's going to be enforced on all inhabitants of the earth, where you are given a mark on either right hand or on your forehead. And he decrees that no one will be able to buy or to sell except the one who has the mark. Obviously, because, Antichrist represents the world system, this government, the Rome 2.0, and it only makes sense that those who belong to that system can engage in buying and selling. Well, therefore, you are going to need some kind of proof of registration, or some kind of ID, whether it's digital ID or some kind of way of authenticating that you belong to the system, so that you can buy and sell. So except the one who has the mark, right? You need to have that, either the name of the beast or the number of his name. And here is wisdom needed, right? He says, here is wisdom. Let him who has understanding calculate the number of the beast, for the number is that of a man, and his number is 666. All right, guys. Well, this part is really, many people have speculated over, and people try to say, oh, 666 means this means that. It is actual number. No, it's not a number. It's not. Well, I don't want to spend too much time on this, because obviously it's in the future, and the writer says you need wisdom to understand it. And since we don't understand it, that tells me that we are not there yet. People who will read Revelation at that time, when they need to take that mark, or they refuse it actually, they will know exactly what it means. But what do we know about it? We know about it that it's not the actual number, okay? And we also know that 6 represents man. Why? Because man was created on the 6th day. It's also not 7. 7 is God's number. And maybe, repeating it 3 times is like, I don't know, humanity to the 3rd power. I don't want to speculate, but basically we don't know it yet, simply because we are not in that period yet, okay? And I believe that at the time it will be very clear, and those who believe in God will give them understanding. So there is no need to worry that without knowing somehow you're going to take this mark. That was not going to happen, because it's going to be very clear. God will make it known at the time what this mark means, and people will know to avoid it. Those who do not want to be a part of this system. Okay, well, very good, very good. So let's just look at some elements of this prophecy, right, that we've just seen. Well, first of all, we see that there's this talk, and we also saw that in Daniel, that there was this fatal wound that healed. Well, this could refer to the fact that the Rome actually kind of disintegrated once, right? It was a slow process. If you remember from history, the Roman Empire was divided into the eastern leg and the western leg. Eastern leg had its capital in Constantinople, and the western leg was in Rome. Okay, then slowly the empire eroded. So you could say that it kind of suffered a fatal wound. However, let's say 2,000 years later, people will be marveling that, that fatal wound healed, and now here we go. We have sort of an empire that reminds us of Rome, 2.0 version. Now, this time on global scale, because at the time Rome was just the known world, right? It didn't encompass the Americas. Well, so out of this kingdom 10 kings will arise. Okay, so we saw that possibility of a prophetic gap in Daniel between verse 23 and verse 24, where there's the fourth beast was, and it was active at the time of John, and yet it kind of died out, and then yet it is going to be revived, and out of those 10 kings will arise, and from that entity the Antichrist will be revealed. Okay, and then we see that in that futuristic vision of Rome 2.0, let's call it, worship of the beast is compulsory. Okay, so it was not possible to enforce that in the past. Okay, just imagine if you lived in some tiny village. You didn't have to, even though under the Roman law, every person needed to plead allegiance to the emperor, because emperor was God, right? So you would go to the temple, and you would once a year, I think it was birthday of the emperor, or I don't know if it's a special day, I can't remember now, but every person would have to burn some incense in honor of the emperor, to acknowledge that the emperor is your God. Okay, and that's why Christians had such problems with it, because they would refuse that, and that caused persecution, and Christians were considered atheists because they did not believe that the emperor in Rome was God. Okay, and they didn't want to worship him. So you can see there could be some parallels in the future where that leader, the Antichrist, has a similar aspirations, but this time it will be enforceable, maybe mainly through technology, for example. So yes, worship is compulsory, and if you don't worship, you basically die. And the image of the beast, which appears to be alive, which we kind of entertain these possibilities. Is it a moving screen? Is it a 3D image of something? Is it an electronic device, or is it just one particular statue of something? Maybe even in Jerusalem, who knows? It could even be set up in the very temple, and then everyone may be live streaming that, who knows? But the image of the beast, which appears to be alive, ensures collective worship, so that everyone has to somehow, either plead allegiance to it, or somehow indicate that they are worshiping that image of that beast. Okay, and of course and the biggest drawback probably of this whole thing is that this commerce, buying and selling, is allowed only for those who are the property of the beast, those who have allowed themselves to take the mark as a sign of belonging to the system, to the beast system. Okay, let's call it system, but John calls it the beast, and it's kind of interesting. Well, maybe he didn't have a particular word, a better word to describe it, right? Okay, very, very fascinating stuff so far. So, guys, what do you think? So, is it possible? Is it a far-fetched idea that a global empire such as Rome from 1st century could come to our world, our planet Earth? Is that possible? Rome 2.0, is that even possible? Well, let's just kind of think about what would be required, what would be necessary for something like this to happen. Okay, and let's kind of see what we find. Well, first of all, what you would definitely need is some advanced technology. For example, internet, fiber optic cables, maybe satellites that monitor everyone 24/7, maybe satellites that know the movement of each individual. Maybe a device that everyone has on their person, such as a cell phone that collects your geolocation data and stores it in some location. So we would definitely need, in order to enforce a global government on the scale that John is describing for us, we would definitely need a global proliferation of advanced technology. Okay, do you think we're getting there? Okay, then we would definitely need some kind of global communication system. So the internet already exists, of course. Instant messaging, texting, for some, even 50 years ago, these ideas were science fiction. Seriously, they were science fiction. You could watch some movies from the 70s and science fiction movies, and people would be talking to each other on the screen. Now we all carry a device on us that allows us to do that. And of course, those devices also, interestingly, are necessary for us to live. Without them, our life is becoming very, very inconvenient indeed. Well, then you would sort of need some sort of a global economy, right? Because it has never been possible. Let's say one country says, okay, if you are not a citizen of our country, then you cannot buy and sell. Well, that's fine. Then I'm going to escape that country and I'm going to do my business somewhere else. But, well, in order to enforce a global Rome 2.0, as I called it, then you would definitely need an integrated global economy. But wait a second, we are already there. Actually, we probably my parents' generation and people before them, they were raised in the era of nation states, where each state was governing itself, politically as a nation. But unfortunately, these days, we are moving away from that model. We are moving towards a model where corporations, which are multinational, international corporations, they are really the ones that are dictating new rules, new laws, new regulations. So this idea of a nation state governing itself is an old idea, and it's going out of use. And who knows, it might take only one more generation to switch things around completely, so that there's only one global economy to which each country everybody wants to have because that on the surface that will look very successful, right? And many countries will want to jump on board and be a part of that project because in order to be prosperous, not to be left behind. Of course, you would also need to have the willingness of the people to participate. And we can sort of see, even in our own times, that the idea of loving your country, or the idea of being patriotic, is not, at least in the media, it is not seen as a positive thing. We are taught that, the collective is more important than the individual's rights. That, in order for us to live better, we need to give up some of our conveniences, some of our, maybe you are familiar with entities such as the World Economic Forum and the slogans that come out of that body. I know there's a famous article that people refer to where it says, you will own nothing and you will be happy, which is sort of like dystopian vision of the future, where people, well, why would you need private property? It's only a problem, right? You can rent it from the state. So these ideas are floated, and not only that, there's a ever so more growing population of people who are buying into these ideas. So I am not saying that we are there yet, but there may be a greater willingness to participate in the future in such a global experiment. But it would be even such a willingness can also be produced, guys. It can be produced because you could come up with a useful crisis or a set of crises which will push people into the thinking that, hey, I think it's a good idea. Let's sign up. Let's get on board. And you know, I believe that, well, I know from history, but that rulers often use a crisis in order to move the people in a particular direction. So if a group of people, like the 10 kings, let's say they get together and they really want to empower the beast with their efforts, well, they will, you know, they are they have a capability to create a crisis that will propel people into this idea of, okay, well, here's a crisis and we have a solution for you. For example, well, maybe your money, your cash is in danger, right? Why would you keep your cash? The banks cannot be trusted. Maybe what we can come up with is some kind of digital currency that you can trust more. It will be convenient, and so on and so on. You can see the possibilities, right? I mean, that's the talk of these things is really on our newspaper headlines every day. We're talking about these issues, right? Very, very interesting. And then, of course, there would need to be some kind of global enforcement, because in the past, you could not enforce compliance. You could not enforce compliance globally, right? However, if you are nowadays, if you are connected to some digital subscription service, and let's just say, actually, as a matter of fact, I was just researching the new operating systems. So, for example, Windows 11, the new operating system, for a while, what they tried to do, they tried to modify the booting sequence of a computer so that you would have to go through Microsoft in order to log into your operating system, which basically means that the computer, it would not be yours to operate, but it would be sort of like, you know, Microsoft would be giving you permission to boot your computer, and that permission could be taken away for some unforeseen reasons. However, that already shows you that the more we are surrounded by technology, the more we are giving up some of the things, some of the rights that we, you know, we enjoyed for a long time. For example, if you, in the past, if you purchased a record, you could play that record as many times as you wanted. This was your record, right? You could lend it to a friend, and then, hey, you could even sell it on a garage sale. You could make some money back on it. But now, of course, all businesses are moving towards a subscription-based model, where even the songs that you downloaded onto your phone and you listen to, enjoy, they don't really belong to you. They are being licensed out to you based on a subscription. And if that subscription is removed, then you do not own those songs. You cannot enjoy them. So as you can see, the technology allows more and more of a global enforcement of this new system that may be just on the horizon. Very fascinating stuff indeed. Okay, so here's what's the most important thing that I'd like you to walk away with from this study. Okay, guys, the most important point is that for much of our history, since John wrote the Apocalypse, the Revelation, right, until just recently, most of these apocalyptic writings have been puzzling to most people who were reading them. They didn't really understand. They thought the beast would be an animal. What is that? You know, they could not imagine. How is that? That's not possible. How can there be a government in the whole world? I mean, that's just not likely, right? However, we are in a very unique position to understand where things are heading, right? Because such a thing is actually possible now. So at the time of John's writing, or maybe even, let's say, 100 or 200 years ago, just imagine the First World War. Europe is divided. People are fighting each other. There is you know, the French hate the Germans. The Germans hate the Russians. And And there has been, this kind of division has lasted for centuries and centuries, if not millennia. And yet only recently, entities such as the European Union emerged in history, where people realize, hey, okay, well, you know what, maybe we can be more prosperous if we work together and if we unite. So entities such as the European Union, which is very interesting. It all started as a thing called the Club of Rome, and then started building slowly. Such models, people might be more understanding towards. Okay, we need to give up some of our national identities, our patriotic zeal, maybe in exchange for more cooperation, more globalism, so that we can be both prosperous and benefit from that kind of relationship. So pulling off a one world government has never been possible before, but we are heading in that direction. Okay, it's still not possible today, but it is definitely something that can almost be seen on the horizon. Okay, and of course, it's interesting that as we read Revelation, we see that the modern technology that we are living these days is only finally catching up to the state of what is presented to us in Revelation. Isn't that interesting? Well, I believe that just as John has written these words, these are true words, and that these things will come to pass because it's God's word, and God's word cannot be broken. So for all, people laughed at Revelation. They thought that, maybe John had some magic mushrooms and he saw, some strange visions. And yet we can see, as we are nearing the end of human history as we know it, these things are becoming more and more plausible and likely. And a lot of people are actually, a lot of world leaders are heading in that direction. So this process may be slow, right? Because think about it, probably when you were very young, or maybe even your parents were talking to you about this idea, one world government and so on, it still hasn't happened. So people are skeptical and say, well, when will it happen, and so on. Well, this process is very slow, and I think it's slow on purpose, because if it were too fast, there would be a stronger reaction against it. But because it's just, one cell phone application at a time, one contract at a time, there's this erosion of the old system, and the new system is replacing it one step at a time. The direction is unmistakable. We are heading in that direction. The process, yes, may be slow, and yet the direction is extremely clear. Okay, we are heading for one world government, and that's exactly what we find in Revelation 13. Here's a picture, guys. Let me just show you. Here's a picture of a magazine, The Economist. And I believe this is from 1988. 1988. So as you can see, this is already old stuff. So on the cover of The Economist, what you see is an eagle, and it says 2018. They are kind of foreseeing that in the future, there will be a one world currency. Notice the eagle is standing on other currencies of the world. There's the Japanese yen that's burning, and there is maybe the German Deutschmark and the US dollar, and they're all burning. And out of the ashes, the phoenix rises. The phoenix rises with the new global currency. So notice there are these elements that people realize. We need a global crisis that will burn the old system. Okay, a major crisis that will propel people into the new system, where there will be one global currency. And that idea was already alive and well in 1988. And maybe at the time it seemed kind of, well, people will just laugh. They say, are you serious? That's not possible. And yet with the development of Bitcoin and other electronic currencies, we can see very easily how this can be actually accomplished, and it might be accomplished in the name of security. Well, because the other currencies, you're going to lose them. So you don't want to lose them, right? let's convert to this new global currency and keep our assets. And who knows, we may be heading in that direction sooner than many of us think. So yeah, look at that. It's a how old is this? Well, this is 30 years old, almost 30 years old, a book, magazine cover, and yet these ideas today are much further, pushed towards its fruition, the realization, than when they first were presented to the world. Well, great stuff. But there's one more point I wanted to mention about this, the Satan's Trinity. I mentioned to you guys that you will see how Satan is trying to copy God's Trinity. Yes. Well, in this chapter today, we saw three characters. We saw, first of all, we saw the dragon, right? From Revelation 12, the dragon that opened up this chapter for us. The dragon was just resting on the shore, watching to see what happens. That's Satan himself. And we know that all authority and power comes from the dragon, okay? Then the second character we noticed was the beast that came out of the sea, or the little horn, the Antichrist, okay? So here we had a system like the Rome 2.0, but really Rome 2.0 is controlled by that little horn that speaks these blasphemous things and boasts, and it's really the Antichrist. So that's the second person of the satanic trinity, is the Antichrist. And then, of course, we saw that second beast that came out of the land. Okay, and in later chapters, you will see that this character is referred to as the false prophet, And his job is really to make sure everyone worships the beast. Okay, so isn't that interesting that here we have an example of something that Satan tries to build. He built like a copy of God's Trinity, which is kind of interesting because some people say, well, Trinity is not even in the Bible. Well, if the Trinity is not in the Bible, then why is Satan trying to reconstruct the Trinity? Okay, why is Satan building his own fake Trinity in Revelation? All right, so here's another argument for the Trinity, but this time let's call it the argument from Satan, right, himself. Okay, but it's very interesting that also not only these three characters here are comprise the Trinity of Satan, but also their functions are sort of like they are the mirror image of God's Trinity, because the beast, the dragon, is Satan himself, and he would be the equivalent of God the Father, from whom all authority and power comes, right? But then we have this Antichrist, which is a human figure, and he's indwelled by Satan, and he's acting on the authority of Satan. So he would be the picture of Jesus Christ, right? Because Jesus, the Son of God, comes to show us what the Father is like, and he is given the authority to perform miracles and so on. He's using the Father's authority during his ministry. And, well, it's interesting. Jesus' ministry was 3.5 years as well, right? Very interesting there too. And of course, we have the false prophet. And the false prophet, remember, he is not pointing to himself. He's not saying, hey, look at me, I'm so special. He comes with these horns, gentle horns like a lamb. So he has a very gentle, kind of almost invisible demeanor. I'm not here, but I'm here. But the point of his ministry is so that the whole world worships the beast. So he is the equivalent of the Holy Spirit, which convicts us of sin and doesn't, Holy Spirit does not testify of himself, but he points us always to Jesus, right? He always points us to Jesus. And here, the same thing, the false prophet will point the people and ensure with force that they worship the Antichrist. Very, very interesting. So here we have Satan's Trinity exposed right here in Revelation, 2,000 years ago, written down for you. Fascinating stuff indeed. All right, guys. Well, I hope you enjoyed today's message. Join us next time, because we will be talking about this great battle of Armageddon. What is Armageddon, guys? I hope you'll come back for that one. So yeah, I would like to know what you think. If not everyone agrees with these views, and that's okay, that's fine. Leave a comment down below, and just make sure you hit that notification bell so that you're notified of upcoming streams, maybe in your time zone, so that you can catch us live at a different time. Well, thank you so much for joining us today. Yeah, share this video with those who you might think might enjoy it. We have great hope. We know that Jesus is going to prevail on this earth, and we are looking forward to that. Of course, this Great Tribulation is a painful time, and yet it is kind of necessary. Well, it has to come to fulfillment, just like we find in God's word. Stay blessed. Remember, Jesus is Lord. Jesus is Lord. Don't fall for any heresies. Read the word of God, pray, and I hope to see you next time on Air Church. Bye for now.